A psychologist that hates psychology? Stick around and find out what we're talking about.
Exploring theology, doctrine, and all of the fascinating subjects in between, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, Dead Men Walking starts
now.
Well, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Moore. Obviously, you can find out more about us at DMWpodcast.com, anywhere on the socials. Hey, thanks for telling a friend. Thanks for sharing this. There's a lot of content out there. We appreciate all of you who share and listen and watch and reply and retweet and all those things that we do to grow and are able to travel to conferences and bring you content every single week with guests and hopefully subjects that bring value to you. Before we get into it, Andrew Rappaport, What Do We Believe? I need you guys to go buy this book. It's awesome. It talks about what we do believe. It's great for mature believers, even if you already know what you think you believe. It's a good reference. It's great for new believers, people who are being sanctified. Andrew Rappaport is a podcast supporter, and we love what Andrew's doing over there. This is a nice hardcover. I think we have soft cover too. But right now, if you click on the link below, you get free shipping. $15, they'll ship it out. No shipping. I mean, you can't go wrong. That's cheaper than anywhere you're going to get it on Amazon, and it's a great book. Also, Dominion Wealth Strategist. Love what those guys are doing. If you want to steward your wealth properly, and you want to obey the biblical mandate of dominion with your wealth, and you are a provider of your home, then you need to call Dominion Wealth Strategists. They are the only distinctly reformed money managers, and they'll do everything from budgeting, estate planning, insurances. I mean, you call them, they'll figure it out. The consultation's free, by the way, as well. And they give away a lot of free sage advice too. So Dominion Wealth Strategists, another partner. Make sure you check them out. Click on the link below and you can find out more about them. So this one is with John Rosemond. We caught up with him at the Dangerous Friends Conference. We went for just about an hour. So this is going to be a lone episode with John Rosemond. He is a psychologist who hates psychology. And he believes that Christian psychology is not only an oxymoron, but it's evil. And he explains why he is still a psychologist or why he has held his license for so long if he thinks psychology in and of itself is evil. We talked about that. We talked about why he thinks psychology is not biblical, not godly. It was very interesting because as a high schooler and college kid, I loved psychology. I loved more of the social sciences, right? When you're talking about personalities and nurture versus nature and things like that. He's talking more about DSM-4 stuff, right? Like, he makes a statement in there and says that something like schizophrenia is behavioral and it's not some type of disease, or there's no such thing as brain imbalance or chemical imbalance, which I found interesting. And then he backs it up. Guys, if you are in either the social sciences or psychology, or not in it, but like even interested in it in a little bit, this was an amazing episode. I mean, I really had fun recording it. That's why we went for almost an hour, just let him talk. I'd ask him questions. He's got over 50 years of institutional knowledge, and John Rosemond was awesome to share that with us. And he's been banned. He's been sued. He won in federal court. He wrote papers in like 1,000 papers nationwide. And I think Kentucky tried to sue him and say, hey, you can't say that about X, Y, or Z. And he said, no, it's my free speech. And it's true. And he took it all the way to the federal court and won. So just a crazy story, but a great guest. And I really enjoyed it. And I hope you guys enjoy it too. So the next voices you'll be hearing is myself and John Rosemond. Here we go.
Where'd you see him at?
Bonham was a great drummer.
Where did you see the Who at? And you said 69 or 66?
Chicago's Stockyards Auditorium.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
You were living in Chicago at the time?
Yes.
Or you traveled there to?
No, I was living in Chicago.
I bet you that was a wild concert.
The Blues Magoos played. The Count Five played.
Yeah.
The Who.
Wow.
And no one knew who the Who was.
Yeah.
And but the headliner was Herman's Hermits.
They were headlining over the Who because the Who were just coming up then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like Jimi Hendrix opening for the Monkees.
Right?
Did you know that he did that?
I didn't know he did that.
For the Monkees.
On his first tour of the United States.
Like, hey, we're the Monkees. We like monkeying around, the Monkees.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix opened for them,
He
huh?
opened.
You got to start somewhere, I guess, right?
Yeah. I saw, and 3 years after seeing The Who, in 1969, a week before Altamont, I saw the Rolling Stones in concert in the same auditorium.
Wow.
Audience of, the first time I saw the Rolling Stones was 1966
Okay.
in a 1,000-seat theater.
Wow, that's intimate.
1,000 seats.
Yeah.
That's how big the Rolling Stones were in 1966.
Yeah.
I sang in I was a lead singer in a rock and roll band for 7 years. It was my profession of choice.
Okay.
Hold on just a second.
Okay. No problem.
Yeah, sweetie. I am.
She's just checking in? Yeah, I was a drummer in a band for about 3.5 years, and we were signed. We did some regional touring, opened for some national acts, but the Lord was pulling me away from it, saved me at 24. Said the sinner's prayer at 7, but saved me at 24, and that went away overnight, which was by the grace of God, because I don't think I'd be alive if I was still doing that.
I'll tell you who another great drummer was, and I forget his name
Yeah.
too.
Pull that mic up there. We're recording right now, so we'll edit this all down. I love all these stories.
Oh, okay. The drummer for Bad Company,
Yeah,
who was also the drummer for Free before he was with Bad Company.
I didn't know that.
Well, Free really morphed into Bad Company. But anyway, the drummer for Bad Company was an incredible drummer.
Yeah.
Bonham, I never saw Bonham in concert, but to me, one of the greatest drummers in rock and roll ever was Ringo.
Yeah. A lot of rock drummers say that.
Well, I mean, listen to his drumming on, anything. His drumming is just so unique, and he had an incredible sense of timing.
I saw Bono talking about him, and he said people think that you measure the greatness of a drummer on technical drumming skills, and he says it's really how that drummer can interpret the song, what they bring to it, and Bono and Ringo did that better than anyone. He took exactly what the Beatles needed or wanted, and then he made it the best that it could possibly be, and that's the mark of a good drummer. It's not how fast your pardiddles are,
Right.
or, how good your triplets are. That helps.
It helps.
Yeah, it helps.
Listen to Ringo drumming on the song Rain.
Okay.
When the rain comes.
Yeah.
His drumming on that song is unbelievable.
Okay. We'll have to go back and look at it. Yeah. Well, okay, let's get into it. So we're with John here. We're at day 2 of the Dangerous Friends Conference, doing interviews. And John saw me cleaning the Dead Men Walking e-bike, and I went, wait a minute, you look familiar. You're one of the speakers. And I'm not very familiar with you, John, so this is going to be fun.
It's okay.
Because we're going to the listeners and myself, we'll explore who you are, your origin story, what you're all about. And then I'm looking forward to you speaking later today.
Well, thank you.
And you said you're a psychologist that doesn't believe in psychology. And I've said for a long time, I'm a realtor that hates realtors. And I said when I first became a realtor in that profession, I wanted to take out a big billboard sign that says I'm a realtor that hates realtors. And my father, who was a realtor, said, you can't do that. You can't start making enemies. And what I meant was there's a lot of bad habits in my profession that I didn't like that come along with that name. And I'm suspecting that when you say a teaser like I'm a psychologist that doesn't really believe in psychology, there's some similarities there. There's something going on with that statement. So give me a little bit of your backstory. We've been talking about you being and I love the fact that you were in a rock band too. I was too for a few years. Tell us a little bit about that, how you grew up, how you came to be where you're at, and then let's get into the psychology thing a little bit.
So I went to college, Western Illinois University, and pretty pretty much right off the bat joined a rock and roll band. At the end of 2 years, my grade point average was a 2.1. I was barely staying out of Vietnam. And we were playing a gig, about 1,000 people. And I looked down, and there was this girl who had parked herself right at the edge of the stage, and she was fascinated by the lead singer in the band, which was me.
Yeah. Always a good
And,
start.
I was a very theatrical lead singer. And afterwards, she introduced herself, and we were married 10 months later.
Wow.
And I pulled myself together, and because I realized I wanted this to last for life. We've been married now 57 years.
Oh, congratulations. Awesome.
Thank you very much. So I had a professor who helped me get into graduate school, and I was on fire for psychology. I thought psychology could be the savior of the world.
Sure.
And my wife and I had our first child in 1969, and he was a total and complete handful. And we were raising him according to the new paradigm, which had been described to the culture by people in the mental health professions, primarily psychologists.
Okay.
And the new, by the way, the new gentle parenting thing is nothing but a rebranding of the same parenting paradigm that psychologists were describing to America in the late 60s and early 70s. They've been trying to sell this for, 55, 60 years
Why do you think that is? Do they
because
truly?
they don't have any new ideas.
Okay, is that what it is? Yeah.
So they just rebrand the old ideas and they push them out there and they claim that they're new and,
Sure.
advanced and so on.
Yeah, you can sell books and research papers
So,
shows and
we started raising our son that way. And by the time he was 3 years old, he was completely out of control.
Okay.
Fast forward 10 years old, his third grade teacher told us that he was the worst behaved child she'd seen in 20 years of teaching.
Wow. It's quite a thing for a teacher to say.
Yeah. Well, they don't say these kinds of things these days. No, but back then they could tell you the truth. So this was in January of his third grade year.
Okay.
This is the backstory. And Willie and I went home. She said, I'm not going to promote him to the fourth grade. And I need to tell you this now so that it doesn't catch you by surprise when this is on his final report card this year. She said, I'm retaining him in the third grade. I'm retaining him with me because I'm the only teacher who can handle him, third grade teacher in the school. So Willie and I went home and we started talking. How could this have happened to two reasonably intelligent, responsible people?
Yeah.
And especially given that we were doing exactly what my profession was telling people to do. And it was my wife who said, well, when we were children, we never knew a child who was as ill-behaved as our son. We never knew a child who was as ill-behaved as our son. She said, we were raised an entirely different way than we are raising him. Don't you think that if we had raised Eric the way we ourselves were raised, that we wouldn't be having these problems? I mean, I remember her exact words, and it was like being kicked upside the head by a mule, as we say in the South. And I realized, oh, right.
Yeah.
You can't raise children in two entirely different ways and arrive at the same outcome. And so at that moment, Willie and I decided that we were going to turn our parenting back 30 years and begin raising our children exactly the way we had been raised. And we itemized what that meant.
Sure.
How that would translate. We sat down with Eric and we said, we had a meeting with your third grade teacher, and she told us that you're the worst behaved child she's seen in 20 years. And you're reading a year and a half below grade level. And your second grade teacher made a mistake promoting you to the third grade, and she is not going to make the same mistake. You are not going to the fourth grade next year. And he virtually came apart at the seams. He started crying and sobbing and
Sure.
shrieking, and he said, I'm not going to the fourth grade.
Yeah.
Between sobs. I mean, it was like some plaintive cry.
Yeah.
And I said, I didn't say that. I said, your third grade teacher, Mrs. Stewart, she said that.
Yeah.
And he sort of came to, and he looked at me and he said, well, what's the difference, Dad? I said, the difference is you have 4 months to persuade her that you can be a responsible fourth grade student. And I've already told you what she has said. You're reading a year and a half below grade level.
Yeah.
And you're the worst behaved child she's seen in 20 years of teaching. From now on, Mom and I are not ever again going to ask you if you have homework.
Right.
We're not going to ask you if you finished your homework. We're not going to ask to see it. We're not going to check it. We're not going to help you with it. I'm not going to define words for you. I'm not going to explain directions for you. I'm not going to demonstrate a math problem for you.
Yeah.
We're going to give you zero help with your homework, and we're never going to ask you questions like, do you have homework? What is it?
Right.
I said, you are old enough to figure out for yourself how to get to the fourth grade. We believe you can do that. Do it.
Yeah. What was his response to that? In the like immediately in the long run, did it?
Well, immediately his response was, Dad, if you don't help me, how am I going to get to the fourth grade? I mean, we'd been helping him with his homework every night.
Sure.
Up until that point for 3 years. And I looked at him and I said, well, you won't understand the answer to your question, but if we have to help you get to the fourth grade, then you shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And 3 months later, we had a conference with the same teacher, and we didn't communicate with her during the 3 months.
Okay.
Purposefully. And she said, and I remember exact words. She said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep on doing it.
And what were you doing?
Nothing.
Okay.
Absolutely nothing.
What do you think the change was?
The change was we handed complete responsibility for his life to our son.
Okay.
And she said, I've never seen such a remarkable transformation in a child in a 3-month period.
Yeah.
In my entire teaching career.
Huh.
She said, to be very honest with you, I was not prepared for this. Overnight, he became the best behaved child in the class. And in the last 3 months, he has pulled himself academically up to the point where he is at grade level. And she said, I never thought I'd say this, but he will go to the fourth grade next year.
Wow.
And at the end of the fourth grade, he was a straight A student. And I began to realize from that experience that everything I had learned in graduate school, everything, no exceptions, was a lie.
Okay.
And I began to realize that my profession is not a science, it's an ideology.
Okay.
And I began to do a deep dive into the background of my profession. It's the most atheistic profession on the planet.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, was confirmed by a recent study done by Harvard University.
Meaning what? The people who hold degrees in that profession, or just the ideology overall, or how did they prove that it was atheistic? What do you mean? I agree with you, but
Harvard University, in concert with Stanford and Princeton, I believe, maybe Yale, they polled psychology graduate student professors and psychology graduate students and they polled various disciplines, in the business school, in the humanities school, in the English department, in the sciences, and so on and so forth, and discovered that psychology is the most atheistic profession on a university campus. And I was it was an eye-opening experience for me.
Now, were you a believer? Were you a believer at that time?
No, I was not. I didn't become a believer until I was 50 years old.
50 years old. But even then, all those years before, you realized the ideology I had learned incorrect.
Totally incorrect.
Not right.
Yeah, that no psychological theory has ever been verified. No psychological theory concerning human nature has ever been verified by research.
So it really is a pseudoscience.
It's a pseudoscience.
Yeah.
It's a farce.
Were you basing that just off your experience with that one experience with your child, or was there other things going on in your life where it was opening your eyes to that?
That experience with Eric opened my eyes, and I began to see what was really going on with child rearing in America.
Yeah.
I began to see that the problems that American parents were having with children, which were, and this was, the 70s, the 80s, unique historically, completely unique.
Yeah.
That in children at no time in history in any culture had behaved as badly as children were behaving in America in the 70s and 80s, and it's continuing and getting worse today. And I realized that the problem stemmed back to the advice that my profession was giving American parents.
So what's the gap between that realization and you becoming a believer? How was that? 20 years, 30 years?
20 years.
20 years, okay. What do you do during that time? Are you still in the profession? You realize...
I've been in the profession ever since.
Okay, so what do you do as someone who's a psychologist that doesn't believe in psychology? What do you do as a profession? Well, what are you doing you have that realization. You go, this ideology is wrong. This is probably pseudoscience. Nothing's been proved. What do you do in the profession for the next 20 years?
I've written a nationally syndicated newspaper column for 45 years.
Okay.
When it was at its peak, it was appearing in about 750 newspapers around the country.
Okay.
I retired it 2 years ago, and everything I do now is online.
Sure.
Very busy public speaker, and I've had a private practice career. But I tell people right off the bat when I'm doing counseling with them that I'm a psychologist, but I'm not going to be doing psychology with you.
Okay.
I'm going to be doing counseling, and I'm going to be doing biblically based counseling.
So what's the difference between doing psychology with someone, and counseling or biblical based counseling? Well, in a nutshell, what's the difference?
Psychological therapy is all about your feelings.
Yeah.
And this is what the psychological profession began to emphasize in the 1960s and 1970s. They basically defined good parenting as being sensitive to, properly understanding, and properly responding to your child's feelings.
Yeah.
So, I asked, just to put this into historical perspective, I asked people my age, did your parents ever have a conversation with you about your feelings? I have yet to run into anyone my age whose parents had a conversation with them about their feelings while they were children. I mean, my parents never had a conversation with me about my feelings.
Now, mine did, and I do with my kids, but it's in the context of Jeremiah, of don't let your emotions control yourself, don't trust them. They can betray you. They are a real thing. God does give us emotions. They are a common grace. But at the same time, we don't put our trust in them. We don't let them control us. That we don't let them make our decisions for us.
You don't affirm their feelings.
You don't affirm every emotion.
Right.
So, and especially, you've had children and I have them. They have some really wild ideas based on their very wild emotions.
Proverbs 22:15.
Yeah.
Foolishness is bound in the heart of the child.
But unfortunately, we're like 2 or 3 generations in now where that's not the case for the majority of parents and how the way they're parenting, though.
Okay, one
Everything
of the things
is-
I tell parents is
Yeah.
the more you talk to a child about his feelings, the more feelings he's going to have. And feelings are what make us human,
Right.
but feelings are, in an undisciplined state, very destructive.
Yes.
They are self-destructive,
Perfectly
and
said.
they are destructive to relationships.
And when you put the emphasis all on that, and that's the be-all and say-all of who you are, is how I feel and the reactions to my feelings and my emotions, and that's the center of who you are, that's a really tough place. If you're a child and you believe that, and parents are teaching kids that, essentially by the way they're parenting, that's a rough life.
As evidenced by the fact that the mental health of children has deteriorated since the 1960s by a factor of 10.
Yeah, what is it? 87% of Gen Z identify with either anxiety or depression.
Yeah,
That's
something
insane.
like that.
Yeah. So you're doing this work, and then you say, okay, I don't do psychology, I do counseling.
I do biblical counseling.
Biblical counseling. I'm sorry. Yep. We do put the biblical in front of that. Because I had a real issue with this, because I had some, in the broader evangelical church, there's a real embrace of psychology. Because I for years I've railed against, personality tests and the Enneagram and birth order and temperaments, and I've struggled with it because I was in sales for years and years and years, and I always tell this joke. It's not a joke, but I would see 10 to 15,000 people a day in my 20s and 30s, and pretty good at reading people in the way they're going to react. And I would tell a joke to someone as they walked in, and by the way they responded to it, I'd put them in 4 buckets, and I knew how to sell to them, whether they're introvert or extrovert, or some would say sanguine or melancholy or phlegmatic, or, those personalities that are out there. And I realized that it is a real thing. There is a such thing as someone who prefers more introvert activities than extrovert.
Very definitely.
There is something to birth order. There's a reason why 87% of CEOs are firstborns. There's a reason why, secondborns have, and it talks about it in the Bible, about birthright and things like that. But then when I looked into psychology, I just realized how anti-God, how self-involved, how narcissistic, how much they hate Christ, really the ideology, kind of what you're talking about. And I went, I see all kinds of people walking around calling themselves Christian psychologists. And I go, how can we have a round square? How is this possible? And when I started pushing back on it, boy, did I just get ostracized, especially within the more broader evangelical church. Because I think what they wanted to use the ideology of the world and try to somehow overlap it with the Bible, and just because they were Bible-believing Christians, the two could coexist. Where do you land on the realness of things like personality, birth order, generational differences, temperaments, and then aligning that with, well, I pull that out of the worldly ideology, but it still can be used for effective biblical counseling.
Well,
Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah. Social psychology and clinical psychology are two
different things, and you're more clinical.
I was trained as a clinician,
Clinical.
yeah.
Can you tell me the difference between those two for those who don't know?
Well, you just expressed the difference. Social psychologists are concerned with trends. They're concerned with facts. They're concerned with statistics that can be verified. Clinical psychology is all about your feelings.
Yeah.
It's all about how you were raised, which, the first question that a clinical psychologist is trained to ask with a new client is, tell me about your childhood. We believe that parenting is deterministic.
Yeah.
Which it's not. It's an influence, but it's not deterministic.
Yeah. Where do you land on nurture versus nature? In general, is it half and half? Is it one influences more over the other? Because we've seen a lot of studies in the genetic area where it seems like genetics have a lot more to do with it than maybe environment. Do you think it's a mix?
90% of our genes, we don't know why they're there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for them
we would just call it junk DNA. We go, we don't know what it is.
DNA,
It's just, and then we find out later, oh, it's for this, it's that. Yeah.
Yeah, God didn't create any junk.
Amen.
God put that there, and we just simply the secrets belong to God, right?
Yeah.
So I believe that children are born with a personality. I believe that you are born a person. You are not born a blank slate.
Okay.
You're not born a rock.
Right.
Somebody
starts inscribing on you.
imprints a personality on you. But I believe that your upbringing is an influence, but I also believe in free will.
Yeah.
So I believe that children, they program themselves and they develop habits. And, what we're calling diagnoses are just bad habits that people have developed over their
Sure.
lives. So you have a bad habit of being depressed all the time. You have a bad habit of, in social situations, being anxious.
Yeah.
You have a bad habit of scratching the left side of your nose when you're in conversation with people. When we think of bad habits, we think of behaviors like that.
Okay.
Well, he has a bad habit of when he talks to you, he looks over to the left. He doesn't maintain eye contact with you. So we're defining bad habits as behaviors.
Okay. And how would you define them?
I maintain that we have bad cognitive habits.
Okay.
We develop bad emotional habits. And we develop bad behavioral habits.
Yeah.
So what we're calling schizophrenia is just a set of bad habits. What we're calling depression is a set of bad habits. What we're calling obsessive compulsive disorder is a set of bad habits.
Yeah.
So people develop bad habits.
Yeah. You know what's funny is when I was I think 18 or 19, I was a rowdy, running from the Lord, young man, rock band and all that. And got into some trouble and had to go to some court-appointed counseling. And I remember in the very first session, the therapist said that, what was your upbringing like, right? Just like you said. And within 5 minutes, she goes, I think, this is how fast she diagnosed me. I think you might suffer from ADHD just by talking to you in a few minutes, right? And that kind of stayed with me, even after I was saved and just someone kind of speaking that and going, yeah, you suffer from ADHD. I told my wife that when we first got married, and we dated for 6 years, and right after we got married, I said, when this happened, and she said, you don't have ADHD, you're selfish. You just don't pay attention to people because you're thinking of you're not focused. And I went, well, no, there's this whole thing called ADHD, right? We're two lay people getting into this argument. But years later, I reflect back on it, and it was very that simple. The thing that I said, well, I can't pay attention, I can't remember names, I get distracted easily, is very self-serving. It was almost it was very narcissistic. It was very selfish. It was a bad habit. It was a sinful habit that I had. And then I started thinking, how many other people are diagnosed, have on medication, change their lifestyle simply because of a very simple sin problem?
Depression is a form of narcissism.
Interesting. I bet you that doesn't get you a lot of friends when you say that, though.
Yeah,
especially in your
not.
industry.
Depression is a form of self-absorption.
Okay, expand on that. What do you mean?
Well, a depressed person, is he thinking about anything else but himself? No, he's not.
Yeah.
Jesus himself defined that as a sin. To follow me, you have to get rid of yourself.
Yeah.
Your problem, your stumbling block is yourself.
Yeah.
Your absorption with yourself and the persona that you present to the world.
Which is interesting that you say that, because a lot of people who said they've suffered from depression, well, I've talked to many people, and they've found if they've been in a season of depression or something, going and volunteering, helping other people, doing charitable work actually helps them.
Absolutely.
And you go, huh, that kind of makes sense then, because
out of themselves.
You're not thinking about yourself.
Right.
Huh. Yeah. I have to imagine, though, in this day and age, you say that to just a group of average people, and you'd be tarred and feathered. You can't tell people that, hey, because you're a victim. Everyone has something, and they're a victim. I have ADHD and depression and anxiety, and I have all these things, and everything's a disease. It's not my fault. I have a fat disease. I have a drinking disease. We've gotten to a place in this society where there's no personal responsibility for anything.
Well, this is what a therapist does. He helps you construct a personal soap opera out of your childhood in which you become a victim.
Yeah.
A victim of something you can't do anything about. Okay. And therefore you need to come see him and talk to him once a week.
Yeah. Yeah,
you use the term you had ADHD. I have ADHD.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as having any psychiatric diagnosis.
Okay.
You can have leukemia.
Right.
Okay. If a doctor says to you, you have leukemia, and you say, prove it, he can show you blood tests, he can show you serum sample,
Yeah.
he can show you analyses of, objective analyses of things in your body that scream leukemia.
Yeah.
But if a psychiatrist or psychologist says you have ADHD, you have schizophrenia, you have manic depressive disorder, and you say, prove it, he can show you nothing.
Well, I mean, don't they would base it on behaviors, wouldn't they? Well, do you do this?
Yes,
but
my point is these are concepts. They're not realities.
Right.
They're concepts.
So
and basically what it boils down to is you have developed some bad habits.
Yeah.
And for someone to say, I know how you developed these bad habits,
Yeah.
is tremendously narcissistic. For them to say that.
Yeah.
No, they don't.
Right.
They don't know how you develop these bad habits.
Well, just to play devil's advocate, could they say, well, based on the decades of patterns and data we have from past patients who showed these behaviors, then we categorize that and go, if this group of people showed these 7 out of these 10 or 9 out of these 12 types of behaviors, then we're going to categorize it as this and label it. Isn't that what they're doing?
Social psychology.
Okay,
that's not clinical psychology.
Okay, I guess I'm confusing
And
the two
there's
then.
some validity. Well, it's just the collection of statistics across a population.
Sure.
Okay. So social psychology has some use.
Yeah.
So social psychology says most CEOs are firstborn and their parents were divorced.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
all studies point to a mean. They
Sure.
describe a mean. They do not apply necessarily in individual circumstances.
Correct.
So there are CEOs, very successful CEOs of very successful companies who were third born,
Sure. Yeah.
whose parents never got a divorce.
Right. Yeah. Which really, so your point is it's really only pointing to a mean. It's
pointing
not,
to a mean.
It's not like
That's all it's
leukemia,
doing.
like you have it or not. It's not like every single firstborn is a CEO and every single non-firstborn is not a CEO, right?
Or
Not
every
a CEO.
CEO is a firstborn.
Or every CEO, right.
Right. 87% are firstborns.
So they're looking at trends and they're looking at
trends,
Okay.
which is fine. Collecting statistics
Which can
in a
be useful.
population can be useful.
Going back to the has ADHD, does that, where you say you don't actually have it, you have a collection of bad habits and behaviors, does that move all the way up to just about every single category of
mental disorder.
mental disorder? I mean,
Yes.
sociopath.
Okay. What
Right?
they want you to believe, this is what they want you to believe, and this is how they're selling themselves.
Okay.
They want you to believe you have something called a biochemical imbalance,
Yeah.
which no one has ever proven exists.
Yeah.
Okay, in the first place, you can't prove that it exists, and you can't prove that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You can't apply the null hypothesis to the theory
Right.
that you have a biochemical imbalance. In your central nervous system, there are several hundred biochemicals. They are constantly in a state of flux.
Sure.
How do you determine what a balance is among 300 variables that are constantly in a state of flux?
How do they do?
No, they don't.
They don't
can't.
at all. They don't even take like an average and go, well, the average human has this levels.
No.
Yours is here and here.
A very famous psychiatrist, very famous,
Yeah.
known by every psychiatrist in America, said, I quote, "The term biochemical imbalance is nothing but a useful metaphor."
Wow.
Okay, which means it doesn't exist. It's an abstraction. It's a concept. It's a way of explaining something to people. But it is a disingenuous way of explaining something to people.
Yeah.
Because it implies that there's something wrong with the person's physiology. And no one has ever proven that concerning any psychological diagnosis.
Wow.
People say, well, I'm bipolar. I've got a biochemical imbalance. Who diagnosed it? Well, my psychologist. Well, did he do a blood test? No. Well, then how does he know that you have a biochemical imbalance?
Yeah.
Well, he said that all people with bipolar disorder have biochemical imbalances.
Wow.
Okay, these are lies. They're total lies.
So how do
let me go back to the term biochemical imbalance is nothing but put this next word in capital letters in bold font.
Okay.
Useful metaphor. So the question begs,
what is it useful for?
how is it useful?
Yeah.
And the answer is?
I'd say drug prescriptions.
Right.
If I was being
So
narcissistic
we are
or
shilling,
pessimistic.
basically, people in my profession
Yeah.
are shilling for Big Pharma.
Yeah.
We are in violation of the RICO Act
Yeah.
because no psychiatric drug, this will blow people's minds. Are you listening out there in podcast land? No psychiatric drug has ever reliably outperformed a placebo in double-blind clinical trials. I'll repeat that. No psychiatric drug has ever reliably outperformed a placebo in double-blind clinical trials. So someone out there in podcast land will be throwing something at their speaker system right now, whatever they're using, saying, well, I take such and such a drug for my bipolar disorder and I can't get along without it.
Yeah.
And I'm saying to that person, right, because the placebo effect has been verified. If a guy in a white coat with a stethoscope hanging around his neck
tells you this pill's going to help you,
this is going to make you feel better, there is strong likelihood that if he's giving you a sugar pill, you will feel better.
Yeah. About the same percentage because they don't outperform.
Right.
So it could be one or the other.
Reliably is the term. They don't reliably outperform. Sometimes in double-blind trials, placebos outperform the drug.
Yeah.
Sometimes the drug outperforms a placebo, which is why psychiatric drugs are vetted by the Food and Drug Administration using a completely different set of standards.
Really? I didn't know
than
that.
drugs designed to intervene in verifiable physiological dysfunctions.
Sure, like a blood thinner or something.
Right.
Yeah, because those are actually probably doing
those
something.
Those are actual diseases.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And those drugs actually work. Placebos won't lower your cholesterol level.
Right.
Placebos won't shrink a tumor.
Okay, so that's backing up your statement of it goes back to habits and behaviors then. Right, if I can take a placebo and change my behaviors and actions. Right.
But people are inclined to soap opera.
Yeah.
People are drawn to the opportunity to create soap opera out of their lives. And you know people like this.
Yeah.
We all do.
Sure.
We are drawn, human beings are drawn to the opportunity to create soap opera out of our lives. And all of these soap operas have as their common denominator the theme, you are a victim of circumstances beyond your control. The circumstances that my profession is pushing are these mythological, physiological circumstances like biochemical imbalances.
Wow.
Brain differences.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of a national study that was done in the 90s where I think it was 20 or 30,000 people they studied in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they found out that those who never entered the program that self-identified as alcoholics and those who entered the program, the failure rate was higher to those who went to AA than someone who did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, this is going
so it is a behavior thing then. It's not like the program is helping you.
No, it's a bad habit.
It's like stop drinking.
Yeah, you can stop drinking anytime you want to.
Anytime you want, yeah.
You know, and this is going to infuriate some people listening to this podcast. This idea that alcoholism is a disease.
Yeah.
Okay, where is the disease?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah. Show me the blood work. Show me the cells. Show me the everything.
Show me the enzymes. Show me
Yeah.
Show me
The
that.
proteins.
No,
Whatever's
they
getting
can't.
changed. Yeah.
Okay, it is the only disease that can be cured in a group conversation.
Right. Yeah. I've never really talked my way out of cancer.
No, you can't talk your way out of cancer.
In a group setting.
You can't go to a cancer group
Yeah.
and say, three sessions later, 3 meetings later,
cured, yeah.
I've stopped cancering.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, this has been built upon though for decades. I mean, we started somewhere, and now we're here.
Well, this is how we're selling ourselves to the American public. We look. We are in. I'm trying to get states' attorneys generals interested in this.
Yeah.
In decertifying psychology, we are guilty of deceptive business practices.
Yeah.
And we are in violation of the RICO Act. Clear violation of the RICO Act because we are shilling for Big Pharma.
Yeah. It is kind of racketeering, isn't it? Across state lines.
It is definitely racketeering. Yeah.
So what do we do with something like so heavily ingrained in our society, like the DSM-4, where we just run to that like the Bible and go, oh, well, it's listed in here, it's a thing. I mean, could you imagine trying to take that away from people? I'm assuming you think probably the majority of it, they're not, the things they're defining in there aren't even what they say, right?
The majority?
All?
All.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was giving you a little.
My profession is a complete farce. The efficacy of no therapy, no psychological therapy has ever been verified.
Yeah.
No psychological therapy.
That's a crazy stat.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're basing a whole profession on something that is unverifiable. That's pretty.
My profession cannot tell when people are faking symptoms.
Yeah.
You can't fake cancer. You
Right.
can't fake high cholesterol. You can't fake high blood pressure. You can't fake leukemia. You can't fake a bunion.
Well,
But you can fake depression. You can fake schizophrenia.
Sure.
And my research has been done and has proven my profession cannot tell when people are faking. Therefore, we should not be admitted as expert witnesses in trials.
yeah, that's true too.
We should not be
tough.
admitted as expert witnesses in courtrooms. We should not be
Yeah.
allowed in schools. We should not be allowed to diagnose children against their will. Children do not know what's going on.
Yeah.
They are not giving their consent because they are not being informed.
Yeah. In all fairness, there's a lot of areas, though, not just in psychiatry or psychology, but many areas where we say, oh, this person's a witness, and we put them on this, handwriting. That was a big one for years and years. Handwriting experts. Oh, yeah. And then they find out, oh, that's so inaccurate. We should never be putting anyone on the stand for, handwriting. The DNA stuff in the early stages was insane.
There are no practice standards in my profession. Can you imagine going to a dentist and the dentist is a humanist dentist?
Okay.
And the guy down the street who also advertises himself as a dentist, he's a behavioral dentist. And the guy further down the street is a Freudian dentist.
Yeah.
And the guy further down the street is a Gestalt dentist. No, there's one set of practice standards in dentistry. There are no practice standards in psychology.
Yeah.
Once you obtain a license from a state psychology board, you can practice any therapy you want as long as you don't have sex with the client.
Wow.
That's the only practice standard that's
a
really
pretty low.
meaningful.
That's a pretty low standard.
Fairly.
Okay, but I would say too that this profession you're talking about over the last 40 or 50 years has probably gotten us to where we are in a lot of this stuff with transgenderism and gender expression and identity, because the old street joke 30, 40 years ago is, oh, a guy goes into the psychiatrist, hey, I'm Jesus Christ, right? And then there's a joke that ensues. Now if a guy comes in and says he's Jesus Christ, you go, I'm glad you identify that way. I mean, we're totally backwards.
My profession is solidly behind homosexuality. My profession is solidly behind child transgenderism.
Yeah.
My profession is atheistic,
Yeah.
fundamentally. My profession is fundamentally relativistic. My profession is fundamentally progressive. We are a bunch of liberals. Liberal, atheist, relativistic progressives. I mean, you can't get any worse.
So let me ask you this as we finish up.
No Christian should ever go see a
Psychiatrist.
or psychiatrist.
I agree with you.
See, I'll say that in a church, and you mentioned it early on in this interview. You get stoned, figuratively speaking, in many evangelical churches. I mean, I've had pastors come up to me and tell me, "Oh, John, if we had known what your message was, we wouldn't have brought you here. We have psychiatrists and psychologists in our congregation." And I say, well, you ought to be telling these people the truth about themselves.
Yeah.
I discovered the truth about my profession. I don't think that I think 99.999999999 people in my profession have never done what I did and do a deep dive into the profession, a dive deep enough to come to the conclusions that I've come to.
Right.
And by the way, I've challenged other psychologists to debate me on these terms. Oh, no. They will throw stones at me.
Sure.
They won't debate me.
Well, they probably don't have anything to stand on, really.
They have nothing to stand on.
Yeah.
I'm telling the truth.
So, like I said, yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean,
the truth always wins in a debate, right?
Simple as that. I'm telling the truth.
All right. So as we finish up here, though, I want to ask one last question. So why? I think people would be wondering this. So why stay in the profession? What's the motivation?
I can speak with credibility about the profession.
Yeah.
If I was a carpenter and I stood up and I said, well, this is the truth about psychology, people would say, well, you're a carpenter, man. What do you know?
Right.
If I was a realtor, if I was a mechanic, what do you know?
Which is also wrong, though.
Psychologist.
Right? Which is wrong. I mean, that's a logical fallacy.
It's wrong.
It's an argument from authority.
It's a logical fallacy,
But yes, you're absolutely right. People would go, get out of here.
About the profession with complete credibility.
Yeah.
I'm a psychologist. I've been a psychologist licensed by the state of North Carolina since 1978.
They're still claiming you, huh?
Huh?
North Carolina's still claiming you?
Yeah.
They haven't kicked you out yet?
Oh, listen, my psychology board regrets the day they ever gave me a license. They tried to take it away from me 3 times.
Really?
I had to sue the state of Kentucky in federal court for trying to restrict my First Amendment liberties.
Wow.
The state of Kentucky, the Attorney General of Kentucky, acting on the impetus of the State Psychology Board of Kentucky, ordered me in 2013 to stop publishing my newspaper column in Kentucky. Because the State Psychology Board claimed that through my newspaper column, I was practicing psychology in Kentucky without a license issued by the Kentucky Psychology Board.
Stop.
Hey, I sued them in
Are you going to sue Dear Abby, too?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we asked them. They had no answer.
Yeah.
Why aren't you suing Dr. Phil? Why aren't you suing Dr. Laura? Why me? Well, because I'm the only one of the group
who
tells the complete truth about psychology. And I was upsetting many apple carts in the process. So we sued him in federal court. Guess who won?
Did you win?
Yes.
Good.
I won in federal court.
Awesome.
Suing the state of Kentucky.
Wow. All right, so tell everyone.
I told you before, I'm telling the truth.
Yeah.
And you put the truth up against a lie, and the truth is going to win in an impartial situation.
Yeah. All right, tell everyone, we'll link this up, but tell everyone where they can find any of your stuff. You got a website you want to send them to, or social media places, or where can people find more about you or your speaking events and things like that?
Go to John Rosemond, JohnRosemond.
Okay.
.com.
Yeah.
You can go to social media. I have a weekly Substack.
How you liking Substack? Very popular in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
People love it.
Well, I can say what I want to say.
Yeah.
You know, when I was writing a syndicated newspaper column, editors would call me up and go, "John, we can't run this column."
Really? Okay, yeah.
You know, or we're running your column and we're getting a lot of complaint. And my question would be, who's complaining? And always the answer was other psychologists.
Other psychologists,
yeah. Well, of course they're complaining.
Yeah. Do you have any books? Are you an author?
Yeah, I've written 20 books.
Okay. That shows my ignorance.
I've said about all I have to say about raising children in psychology. So I'm getting into theology now, which has been a hobby of mine for a long time. But
okay.
I'm turning it into a book.
I'll tell you what, you'll have to come back on in the future. We'll catch up and maybe we'll do a little more theology-centric episode. But John, it was so good meeting you. Thank you for taking time with us.
Man, thank you for inviting me on your podcast. I enjoy this kind of thing. You know,
we try to keep these a little bit shorter here, so I didn't want to go too much longer. But I would love to have you back on and talk kind of long format, because this stuff is very interesting to me. Obviously, you're an expert in your field. You have a very unique and truthful point of view on these things. And I think it's something that needs to be said. I love that you're on Substack. The funny thing is, it's probably between the speaking conferences, the books, and the Substack, you're reaching more people now than you ever did with the newspapers.
Absolutely.
And you were in, like you said, almost 1,000 newspapers. So it's it's shifted. People are looking for truth, man.
I stretched the newspaper column out as long as I could because I had the longest running syndicated column ever, of syndicated columns that have been continuously authored by the same person.
Yeah.
In American newspaper history.
No way.
And so I just stretched it out as long as I could to stay in front of George Will. But I retired the column 2 years ago and moved everything I'm doing to the internet pretty much. Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of webinars and I'm doing...
Yeah.
I did do a podcast, but I'm writing this book, and I'm so completely absorbed in the book that it's even hard for me to write.
What's the concept of the book? Can you give us a sneak peek?
Book I'm taking, I'm a contrarian. So what I'm doing is I'm with pretty solid evidence challenging the standard theological narrative concerning the story of the fall.
Okay. All right, you're gonna have to come back on when that book's out.
Yeah.
We'll promote it. We'll talk about it.
The book is titled "And Their Eyes Were Opened."
Interesting.
Which is Genesis chapter 3, verse 7.
All right. Well, there you go. It's a cliffhanger and a teaser for when John comes back on in the future when that book's out. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. As you know, we're at Dangerous Friends Conference for the last 2 days. We're mashing these all up together, so we don't know who's coming up next. But guys, remember, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. God bless.
Amen.
Be sure to check us out at DMWpodcast.com, where you can purchase the best and snarkiest merch on the internet, support the show, and leave us a review or message. Dead Men Walking can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Dead Men Walking Podcast, and on Twitter X at Real DMW Podcast. The Dead Men Walking Podcast is part of the Fight Laugh Feast Network. For exclusive show content, be sure to download the PubTV app and become a member. If you're a business that needs to reach hundreds of thousands of potential customers in your demographic, podcast advertising might be for you. Send all inquiries to deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None your biscuits.